water recycling, and rainwater harvesting. There has been ample discussion through the years about the merits of those and other ideas, all of which invite questions about feasibility and cost. So you go down, and so that's what the study said, and then you go down 1, 2, 3, water conservation advocates. These are the people you need on your side of the table, not on the other side of the table, folks. Say the first step should be reduced water use. Conservation is faster, it's cheaper, more flexible. You can adapt as the climate adapts, as the population adapts, says Drew Beckwith, Water Policy Manager with Western Resource Advocates in Boulder, Colorado. They're on the other side of the range, folks. You are not sinking hundreds of millions of dollars in an upfront project and having fixed loan repayments on something that may be antiquated 5 years after you built it. There is such a huge push in Congress to take down Glen Canyon Dam. And you think that sounds facetious. They have fired 8 people in the Bureau of Reclamation that were calling the science bad science because it was inaccurate, because the political forces in the administration and Congress were such, with the Fish and Wildlife Service, that they wanted to take down 4 dams on the Klamath River. It was one of the 2 projects that this was in the 1902 Reclamation Act, okay? They want to take the dam down. They want to take 4 of them down. There's a great body of talk about how wrong it was to build the Glen Canyon Dam. The other part of it is that they have, what I said in the beginning of this paper, over allocated the water almost 2 to 1 on the Colorado. As an example, one of the men that was talking, the leader in this study was from Arizona. There's 500,000 tons of salt imbalance a year in the Arizona project, okay? They don't have enough water to be in salt balance. They don't have enough in and out. So the pressure is huge. Just let me clue you. So you can look at the bottom of this, and it talks about how they're going to put on this program to educate people, but it's this advocacy that we've got to have to be able to offset things that are coming against our communities, our economic interests, things that we all hold dear and dear to our heart. While we would like to think that we live in a world that we're out in the outback and what we do, who cares, nobody ever sees me do what I do. In this day and age of computer technology, they know every stroke that you do on the computer. They know everything that you do for whatever reason, but they have good information and they have great systems of knowing how much efficiency you have. So I wanted to bring that up. If anybody has any questions about that, I can talk a little bit about some of that stuff. I'm not the total expert on it. I depend on people like this to help us do that. But I wanted to go into kind of the local situation. But I wanted to create a framework around why soil health is extremely important to what I just talked about. It doesn't seem like it may be related, but it is. And what I see, having traveled a couple of days around with some really great folks here, do appreciate what Jack and John have done for me, and clearly get an inkling of the situation here, because a lot of the things that are going on here we dealt with in our reality because we became the poster child of how not to do it. I stepped up because hopefully someone needed to do something to fix it, and today we have a couple of projects, and I would invite any group that wants to get together to come to California. I can show you my project, but what came from the pilot project is the implementation of the zero discharge of water into the San Joaquin River, which goes into the Delta of California, which is up by Stockton, that ultimately drains out to the ocean through the Golden Gate Bridge. And we have a 4,000 acre recycling reuse area that takes the water from the drainage system with the selenium in it and actually produces profitable crops. In fact, the Panoche Drainage District, as we go forward, will produce a profit from the drainage water without putting the drainage water into the system. And they take that off of about 100,000 acres of land that needs to be tiled and drained. The Tulare Lake bottom has 5,000 acres of ponds, and we've learned a lot about that. It costs them over $400,000 a year in lawyer fees to keep those ponds open with the Water Quality Control Board. Would it not be better to take those open ponds that are salinized with selenium in them, and they happen to have arsenic in their water? We don't have that. It's a more complex situation for them. But the reality is, would it not be better to come into some kind of a system that produces a positive net return, takes care of the problem, and doesn't have the exposure? The reason it costs them so much lawyer-wise is they have to do mitigation, they have the lawyers, and it's money over and above the $400,000 where they have to take care of wildlife, hazing, and all kinds of things they do. It's something you don't want to get involved in. So the good news is we have some answers. To fix the issues here, in our system, we did a recycling program. You can look up Red Rock Ranch, you can look up integrated on-farm drainage management on the web and kind of get a schematic of how we recycle the water 3 or 4 times before we put it on a solar evaporator. We're not doing that. We're doing some part of the recycling, but we're not doing that. What has happened, what Rudy was talking about yesterday, is when you develop the soil health of the soil, we have tile systems on our land to keep the intrusion of water from outside the land from becoming a problem and pushing the salts up to the top. So the amount of drainage water that we deal with today is about 1/10 of what we had when we started in 1995. In 1995, I was telling some people, we had about a 30-acre portion of one of our 160-acre blocks that was just like this floor, kind of gray and dirt. We got 25 tons of wheat on 30 acres. In 1998, after we tiled that land, and we grew wheat on the land, so we had it open in the summer so we could go and put the tiling in and do all the agriculture engineering, which the NRCS greatly helped us with. Brought that land back in 3 years. We put wheat on that in 1998. We ended up on the same 30 acres of making 90 tons of wheat on that. So the reclamation component of this was really fast. We use sprinklers. Today we're using drip. We have pivots. I have a lot of aluminum solid set sprinklers. Prior to the pivots, we use solid set sprinklers to manage the amount of water on, because we have a limited water resource in our area. And the more water we save, the more acres we can farm, the more dollars we make. So it's a very straightforward economic equation. So with the sprinklers, solid set, hand move sprinklers for pre-irrigation in some situations, but primarily today we actually use a fair amount of drip irrigation, and the pivots put on incremental amounts of water as necessary to keep the crops growing. What we found in our water reuse area was the biology in association where we were growing these salt tolerant grasses that came from the inner mountain area of the United States in these basins that had no exit, like the Great Salt Lake. We have a thing called crested wheatgrass. Cows like to eat it. It's a great stuff. Anyway, and it's very salt tolerant. Anyway, we use that. We have another one called creeping wild rye. It's stoloniferous, so it's like a Bermuda grass, and actually grows and forms a mat. But what happens there, the interface on the soil, you become reactive with the biology that's there. You keep it wet, and you maybe over-irrigate because the salinity is so high. And we have some soils that had ECs of 40 and 60 after being used for 7 or 8 years with the water that had a lot of salts in it. And it still was permeable. Theoretically, from a chemistry perspective, when you have sodium in your water, you do what they call deflocculate the soil. It takes the little clay layers and actually collapses them. And you got to put calcium in there to flocculate the soil, open the pore space so the water can infiltrate. The biology does that for you because of what Rudy's pictures do so well of explaining of how the micropores, how the gelatinous matrix becomes around the roots, and the decomposition of the roots form carbon. In the organic business, a lot of people will use something called an organic tea. An organic tea is taking compost basically and soaking it in water and taking the exudate or the just like taking the tea bag in your cup of hot water, you take that out, and it has tannins, and it has all these different long carbon chains, humic acids. And when I looked at the water coming out of the grass, it looked like brown tea, and that was good. Those are carbon chains in that water. And those are the buffers that were talked about in this program. But what we found was because of better irrigation practices, because of better soil health, we don't have near the amount of drainage water coming out of the tile system. We still have it, we still operate it, but we use it as a safety net. And that's really what it should be. Because as with everything, with our own person, we would like to think that we're in control, right? We don't want to be out of control. It's crazy. But you know, the reality is that we want to be in control of the environment that we're farming in. That's really the best. We have to have a knowledge of what we're doing there. But the reality is, if you have good concepts, good background knowledge of what you're doing there, you can achieve some pretty fantastic things. No one, back in the 80s, under one of the programs that was provided by the NRCS, it was called the Acp Program, there was quite a bit of effort to put in small reservoirs at the lowest corner of the property and have return systems so that we could take the water back around and reuse it from furrow irrigation. That increased our efficiency so we could keep doing what we were doing. But all those systems have gone away today. You know, why? Well, the reason is with better irrigation practices, we don't need recycling of water. We use the water we need on the ground. We keep the soil healthy. When I look at your system, you know, the water district, and I'm sure you do, have a committee, right? You've got a committee. This is about grassroots activism. This is about gathering together, having consensus that we're the deer in the headlights. And you don't want to get starry-eyed like the deer because you're going to get run over, folks. You got to get engaged. There's some names right here in this article you need to talk to real quick. They need to be your friends. They need to be your advocates. You know what? Everyone says, God, that's going to cost so much money. How are we going to load that on all the farmers in the area? Don't worry about it. These are your friends. They want to help. You have friends in high places. I was telling some people last night. I think of the 6 degrees of separation. Huh? You all know people that you don't think you know. There are people that get it, right?
There's water if you
Thank you. Appreciate that. There are people, once they understand what you're doing, you're giving them the privilege of living and being a college professor in Denver or being a doctor in there. You know, how does it work, folks? We need to be doing this. We need to be doing it right. We got some issues here. We got some drainage issues. We have not very much, but enough of something that's going to cause a big problem. I can tell you, it's a big enough deal being an intrastate issue in California that we've been beat up terribly by, and it's cost us millions of dollars to overcome the selenium issue. You don't have an interstate problem. You have an international problem. The environmental community wants to reestablish a wetlands area at the north end of the Sea of Cortez. And the reason is that the biota and biological wildlife need not salt water and not clean water. They need a transition zone. They've dedicated 70,000 acre-feet of water that the system doesn't have. We just talked about that it was over-allocated by 2 times. Where are they going to get the 70,000 acre-feet, guys? We don't just walk around with it in our back pocket. We use it every day, guys. You know, so how is this going to work? So rather than saying, oh my God, they're going to steal our water. What you got to say, we need some help. This is the least cost investment that you as a society can do to preserve your lifestyle in Denver. You don't want to preserve it, that's fine, we'll go away. But when you keep wiping this out, I mean, we've got water problems in the San Luis Valley. You know, the aquifer over in Denton, Texas is kind of going to you know where. You know, where are we going to grow this stuff? We have water, we're here. We actually have some water rights. We're willing to work with you guys, but you guys got to help us out because we're in a competitive world, you know? This isn't Apple that spends $2 to make this with somebody over in China, right? And sells it to us for $600, right? We don't have that kind of expansive intellectual property that we can sell our commodity, whatever it is. It could be apples, it could be hops, it could be grain for 200 times what the value of this piece of plastic is. They make these things pretty darn cheap. They hire people, they hire chefs to cook for them in the cafeteria, and everybody kind of has their free space. It's a pretty nice existence. Why? They have so much money in the system. They got, I forget what it is, but it's $15 or $20 billion in the bank here, and they got like 70 billion over the ocean. It's like, are they making any money yet, folks? I think they are. So how is it that we're going to exist? Because we give them the privilege. We give them the privilege to make this kind of money. We're the farmers, and they need us. You have such a great story to tell. You have to organize as your group and explain why you need the help. The amount of money that you need is more money than you as individuals probably would ever think to have. And it seems a bit mind-blowing. Because of the technology that we have today, I'm on the list for the EPA in San Francisco, and yesterday I got an email. This is interesting. This is an example of what you can do. This is really an interesting deal. And I guess they knew I was coming to talk to you, I guess, and so they sent this to me and wanted me to tell you that they're there to help. Sometimes you don't want to hear that, but the reality is this. The EPA just gave $150 million to the folks down on the corner of Four Corners here. Huh? Why did they give them that money? Because those folks didn't have enough money to do what the EPA wanted them to do, which is to keep the radioactivity out of the Colorado River. They're going to clean up the uranium mine stuff on the reservation or wherever it is down there and get that done. Hey folks, we got Slim, man. You want us to get this out of the river? Hey, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take the old broken down system, and how we're going to pay for that is we want a grant. And we'll work this deal out over a period of time. We'll actually pay back. It's pretty good. Because then you're going to the politician and you're saying, I can have to do an earmark, and I catch a lot of hell for pork when I'm back there. But I can go out there and I can say, we're giving these folks a loan. It could be a 50-year loan, but it's a loan. And we can pay it back. And how we're going to pay it back? My God, we don't make that much farming. We don't have that kind of money to pay it back. Yeah, you do. Because the administration has stimulus money. And they're looking for a way of reducing greenhouse gases. Well, I mean, I'm farming out here. Well, number one, you're storing carbon, so there's an offset right down. But the reality is, you got a huge resource underutilized. You are working on it. We looked at the generation project down at the tunnel, and there's plans for more. And it may take you 5 years to do that. The reality is, let's get it done today. There's no day like today to get it done. They're looking for projects to spend money on. Hydroelectric power is as green an energy source as there is. Once the investments get repaid, it continues to give, other than the maintenance and upkeep, which is rather minor. Western Power Authority is who we work with in our water district. That's a subdivision of the dams of the reclamation, and they wheel the power in the western United States. Their average generation cost for their hydroelectrics is about 0.4 to 0.6 mils. That's less than a penny, folks, for hydroelectric power. And that's because these things were installed a long time ago. They're paid off. They're generating power. You have to take them down once in a while, go through them and do the typical maintenance you would do on any kind of a piece of machinery. But they're very simple in nature, and so they aren't terribly complicated about wearing out. But anyway, that's where you're going to get the money. But you're going to get the money from them because you're going to take the selenium out. Why? Because you're not going to discharge into the Padre River here, going into the Gunnison. It ain't going to go there, folks. That is the pitch that you got to develop, that you can't take water off property. Well, but how's the water going to go from over there to me over here? Because I get it after that guy uses it 5 times, and I'm down here by the river, and they're way up by the dam. And it's kind of like, well, how's that going to work? You got to conceptualize that you need to have the pipelines. We have a 600,000 acre water district that I work in, that I live in, I farm in. We retired 120,000 acres of that land that was the worst affected by the drainage issue. It was more cost effective for us to do that. We took that land, returned it to what would be prairie land, and we use it for grazing with sheep because we get about 3 or 4 inches of rain. We have a little grass that grows like that. It's helped the rest of the people there. We borrowed $80 million from John Hancock, and we're paying that loan back. We're better off today. The GNP, or the gross revenue from our water district, has gone up 20% since we retired the land. People are doing a better job. As an example of what drip irrigation can do for you, I was involved in establishing a cannery in Huron, California in 1990. It processed 120,000 tons of tomatoes to make tomato paste. We had a contract with Heinz for the ketchup business as a good portion of that to help us finance that and move it ahead. 1998, we had built that up to where we have the capacity for 800,000 tons. Technology, like was in my pocket, has taken what took us 23 employees to run, and we added 25, we added 2 more to more than quadruple. Whoop, we lost John. Hello. Did the battery die?
I don't know. We'll have to investigate.
Hello?
We'll need to take that one off.
Oh, sure. I hope I'm not.
Will your iPhone work? Does it do? Will it be a mic for us too?
I think it is good, but I'm not that good, you know.
It's supposed to do everything.
Okay, I think we're live.
Yep. We're alive. Anyway, as the story goes, in 1998, it took 22,000 acres to grow the tomatoes for the cannery. And there are 4 farms, and we did that. We may have had a few tomatoes on the outside with extra farmers because we didn't want to grow that many tomatoes. The reality is today, we're growing and having too many tomatoes, and we're growing that on 12,000 acres. Think of that. It takes us about 30 inches or 2.5 acre-feet of water to grow an acre of tomatoes. But because of drip irrigation, the average yield for the cannery has gone from 37 tons to 55 tons in a period of about 5 years. This year, not just in our place, right? Because of the outstanding results, over 90% of the tomatoes in California will be grown under drip irrigation. This isn't about government mandates. This is about making money, folks. That's why you're doing what you do. Don't worry about the cost. Worry about the yield. Worry about how much money you're going to make. I'm sorry, hang on a second here. We got number 2? Yeah, okay, well, hang on to that for a second because there's some of us that are having some senioritis.
How about too much rock and roll?
Hey, you know what it was? It was when you're 10 years old and wanting to go drive the Caterpillar because that's really cool. And we had this 3T D7 and you had these big levers and you pull them back, push it on the brake and you went, ah! And that clatter on those tracks, it does a number on your ears. Anyway, ask your question, excuse me.
Well, I think the only way to actually get the residential water property is to have water stay with farmland and have the people who want to use it otherwise leasing it from them. Then those farms that are having troubles getting things to work, they can find resources to build things up where they are more functional and useful water. Anyway, the conversation pulls it back to efficient use of by the city or whoever else, and also the farm gets sustained until it finds that it's more profitable to compete with whatever.
Yeah, but and I agree with you. That is how this thing's going to work. The reality is the people looking at you, and it's not John Diener. It's those other folks, you know. It's the recreational interests. It's the cities. It's the environmental community. I'm not trying to be adversarial in saying this, but they have more lawyers than you do. And they will take your water away. And how that comes about is by what they call beneficial use. And if you cannot prove to them that you are using your water for beneficial use, they can abscond with it. Trust me, they've done it. They've done it to us. The reality is we have a good story to tell today, and we're making more dollars per acre by instituting these kind of programs that the NRCS was talking to you about yesterday, that Jay's going to talk to you about today, and we're making more money per acre than we did before because in this society we have to do that to be competitive. We are actually out-competing China in the tomato paste business because we're highly efficient. Their method is predatory in how they approach business. And an example is that the apple industry about 10 or 15 years ago had a pretty good business in the concentrate business. China decided that they were going to own it, and they just drove the price of apple juice and apple concentrate down to nothing. Today, even you'll see on the label it says some part China, some part US. They're still competing with that. So, you know, you've got to be of the mindset is how are you going to compete in the world market with corn, with beans, with whatever that is. You have to develop a niche for your reality, but you can't afford to pay for these improvements from the capital costs. And how you're going to do that is by engaging with people like this that are going to take it away from you and get those people on your side and understand why you give them the privilege to do what they do, because this is not Africa. The reality is you look at Europe, you look at all these other countries, and the movement in Washington is to be more like them. So that's going to cost a lot of money. The reality is that you've got to articulate your position from how you want to be preserved, because not only do you have a right to be preserved because you have some historical water rights, but you also give other people opportunities to do what they want to do. They can understand that. And you're providing good commodities for them at whatever level, whether that's feeding a dairy cow or providing food in a situation in a farmer's market or whatever. We're in it all together. We can't destroy everybody. We're all in the same foxhole, folks. And there's going to be incoming pretty shortly, and we better not be fighting with ourselves because we've really got problems then.
You know, I've been listening to you. You know, I see a person out there that understands every economic means, every efficient means to farm, all the regulatory problems, all the political pressures, all the political pressures, and I'm wondering why the hell you aren't down in Argentina. I mean, or some other place that has an environment like California, but doesn't have the water problems, doesn't have the regulation problems, doesn't have the population competition. And by the way, thank you very much. Our farm was funded by California, done with the Acp Program for salinity. And our farm has absolutely no salt on it because we washed it all out and gave it to you.
There you go. Well, that's the good news about being old is you've washed a lot of it out already.
Anyway, I'm wondering why there's certain other places in the world where you can be a hell of a lot more effective than you are in California or here.
You know, and I grew up on the farm. I went to school to get a degree in ag economics because I wanted to have the ability to do the business part, And then I worked for Wilbur Ellis Company as a pest control advisor after I got out. I took a lot of science classes at Davis. I had almost a BS in philosophy and logic. And so with the economics, have a good liberal arts background. Then come up, took a lot of science at Davis, had really good teachers. As a practical person on the farm, I had a lot of base knowledge, so I could go in and challenge the prerequisites to go take some higher division classes, so I actually had some pretty good classes. And I got out, and I didn't want to be a researcher. I like growing things. And that's what I like to do. And so then the other part of that equation, to answer your question, is one of the things in one of the business classes in Ag Econ at Davis was, it's very clear. If you are going to make your million, young man, you are going to make it where you grew up because you know as much as anybody about the street you live on. If you go on to somebody else's turf, you can imagine the dynamics that you don't even have a clue about. There's a lot of emphasis at the time in 1974 to go to Australia. But you don't know all the dynamics. And it doesn't take many of those to upset the apple cart when you're trying to get started. Have you ever listened to the talk of Kirchner in Argentina? You know what happens to people in Argentina? This is what happens to the farm community. Why? Farm community didn't have any votes, folks. One thing about politics, you got to understand how to count votes. Oh, you want to sell your product? Good. Today, you get a 30% tax. If you want to move that product out the door, no problem. But you're going to take all that profit you thought you were going to make on the corn selling it. We need it for the people here over in Buenos Aires. They have people going out and farmers blockading the port so nothing else can happen. They want to shut the economy down. Why? Because the government's absconding with their ability to free trade. Tell me how I want to be part of that at any one point in time. And it may be going great for 5 years. I haven't been to Argentina. I've been around the world some. I know that that would probably be the world's best place to go farm as a young farmer. Brazil. Not that, it's a good question because I can talk about that one for a while. What is the biggest problem with Latin America? Stability, but there's one reason. There's one reason that makes them different than we are. Not because they're from a different part of the world. And that's part of it. Exactly.
Well, how about Chile?
Okay, let me tell you how it works. Okay. Our system of laws was established under English law, the Magna Carta. The people that wrote our Constitution. You have personal rights. Latin America has Spanish law. The only people that can borrow money in Latin America are the people that are rich and connected to the system, which usually means the government. And at some level, the largest farm in the world, who is it? Who is the largest farmer in the world? Anybody know that one? We're talking about it right here. He's the governor of Mato Grosso in Brazil. The most wonderful place to go as a young farmer and start farming, folks. You gotta understand how it works. You have the system in Mexico and a good lot of the area. A person, if you're not using that piece of land there, and in English you call them squatters, they can come and perfect a position on that, and they can do that in Mexico too. I mean in Brazil. So you may have a big farm, and if you're not using it and generating any kind of economic use of it, people can come and take it away from you. If you're a banker, why does our economic system work? Because you have personal economic rights. And you can assign those rights. Where's the young man? Is the young man here that was here last night in charge of the Delta Economic? He was the president of the Delta Economic. He's not here today. Okay, I'm sorry. I would question him about this stuff. But the reality is, as a banker, you can go to somebody and you want to buy a house. You can do what they call perfect a lien. That means that they can go to the court and say, I loan this person $100,000 to buy that house. And then that person can go to the builder over here and say, I want to build the house, and we got $100,000, and then I'll make payments to the bank. If you don't make the payments, the bank can come and repossess the house. In Mexico, have you seen how they build houses for the regular people, not the rich people? How do the regular people build houses? They buy one brick, one board, one piece of tin at a time, and they live in it while they're building it, because it's all cash today, and it's a here and now. It affects, I was talking to John the other day, we deal with the same mentality within the people that we have, because they come from a system where there's no tomorrow, it's today. And the whole concept is all about what we can take out today. We don't worry about retirement, it's the here and now. That concept pervades the governments of those countries, because while we're in power, we're taking as much money as we can out of this deal because it's our turn. It's our right. What's Hugo Chavez about? His team won. What did he do? He went and took everybody's stuff. So all the regular folks, why would I want to go there? I may be in a bad place, but I'm in a heck of a lot better place than I would be if I was down there, because I don't understand their system. And I don't have enough warriors to fight them. So the United States is the only place to farm. And I tell you, and I haven't been here, but I think this is a pretty good place to farm. And you got a great opportunity to do some things It means you got to get organized. It means you got to do some stuff. But you got great stories to tell. You really do. And people want to hear you tell that story. That's my comment to you in this deal. And by doing these things, you're going to do better than what you're doing today. Don't think that you can't. And it's like they said yesterday, you don't have to do the whole ranch. Take that one field. Try it. But be sincere. Be proactive and do as much as you can. I can tell you the NRCS was a huge help to John Diener. Also, in our situation, the Extension Service, which is from Davis to the Land Grant College, they really have helped me. Not that I didn't have education to go and pursue the right people, but they responded. So the message is that rehab the system as fast as you can. Do worry about how much it costs, but don't worry about how you're going to get the money. If the EPA gave $115 million to the people down at Four Corners, then I think it shouldn't be any problem here, because the material that you've got that's leaching in the system, you may have leached your particular farm out, but they look at it on a watershed basis. And so when you look at the watershed, you have to account for the extraneous water that may be falling out of the ditches or whatever, and you look at the water going into the Gunnison here near town, and that is what they're going to measure. And by doing better irrigation management on the farm, part of that's lasering it. I was talking to the people last night. When you put drip irrigation in, it sounds like, well, now we don't have to worry about leveling the field. You do have to worry about leveling the field. You have to get a uniform grade. Drip irrigation operates at low pressures. That's how it's designed. Otherwise, they all blow up. But we operate ours around 12 pounds pressure. And if you start at the beginning of the field at 12 pounds and you get down to the end because undulations in the land or whatever, and it's at 9 pounds, that sounds like 3 pounds pressure. God, that can't be that big a deal. But the little emitters, what they see is 25% less pressure. What does that mean? That means you get something less of the water. And if you say at 12 pounds, I'm putting on an inch of water in 24 hours or whatever it is, they're only getting 75 hundredths. And if you think that you've got enough water for 3 days, well, down here you only got water for 2 days. Now you're stressing this plant down here pretty hard. This one here is happy. And so so engineering of the system is really important. Part of it is getting set up properly. By installing the pipelines in the system, there's enough head pressure to do two things. One, you're going to have some low head, high flow power generation of small increments. And then the other part is you're going to have enough pressure in the system to basically run the drip system. You can't have an open ditch system take water out of it without pressurizing it to some level to go through the filters and then get out to the field at the proper pressure. So you're going to take care of 2 or 3 problems for yourself. You can't, my recommendation to today is not to get everybody fired up about putting in pivots and putting in drip irrigation systems. You have to fix your water delivery system first. And how are you going to do that? That's going to have, I can tell you, that's going to have the biggest impact on the amount of water going into the Gunnison Dam. You're going to get that money because people want to see you stay in business, because you're going to create a sales pitch for nothing better to say of how important this little jewel is for the local economy, for the economy of Colorado, and for the rest of the United States. Because what happens when Clovis, New Mexico runs out of water? They're going to quit farming. What happens if they have to pull back the amount of land farmed in San Luis Valley. They're going to have to quit farming. Well, folks, we keep shooting ourselves in the foot. Where's our food security at? You're part of it. You're it. I mean, we can do, you know, one of the great things about community gardens in cities is it does draw the picture for those that have the privilege and not having to grovel for their food to see how much effort it takes to do that, to get it to their table. And yes, it's good for them to have some fresh produce for them to eat. They understand, they feel connected to the earth, they feel connected to the system. It's important. It's important for the people in the town to understand that. Why? Today we are almost 5 generations away from the land. Your children are connected because they were born here. You may have half of your children, I don't know what the number is, that are no longer associated with the farm other than mom and dad live there and we go there for Christmas. Think about the people in the town. They have no clue of what it takes to milk the cows 7 days a week. That's a commitment. They got to understand that. Anyway, any other questions?